Rhode Island Education Commissioner Angélica Infante-Green, thank you so much for joining me for our weekly interview. I wanted to start by asking you about teacher absenteeism. We've seen it go up in some schools, either as teachers are quarantined or they are calling out sick because they have a slight symptom and they've been told to do that. If as a precaution in case it might be COVID-19. In Central High School yesterday, the district says there were 42 staff members absent. 25 of those were due to quarantine. So I'm wondering, how does the specter of increased sick calls and quarantines going into the winter weigh in the decision to potentially have schools go remote at some point?
So I know that sounds like a lot of absences in the building, but as you know, Providence has had a lot of absences historically. But it depends on how many overall staff and who's absent. Is it a support staff? Is it the teacher? Is it who is it? What does help us right now is that we're on A-day, B-day schedule. So not everybody's in at the building at the same time. So it doesn't have to be physical staff. And it'll be a case by case. I don't think we're going to say, we're all going out unless there's a bigger decision made that wouldn't be mine about what happens.
By the governor.
That's right.
And so the Providence, I'm sorry if you were you finished answering?
No, yes, go ahead.
The Providence Teachers Union filed a lawsuit about this particular issue. They were focusing on Green Middle School, which had a large number of quarantines over the past 2 weeks. I understand some of them might be ending soon since they're 2-week quarantines, but they did say in their lawsuit, this applies to any school that could be having unsafe conditions. Their argument is that this sort of Tetris of coverage, where teachers might be covering more than one class, or they're covering a class they don't normally teach, or specialists are covering multiple lunch periods or classes and being exposed to a larger number of students than the 20 or so that they expected to be exposed to is unsafe. So what is your response to that?
So there are procedures, right? First of all, you're wearing a mask. You have to be within 6 feet or less, or 2 feet, 1 foot, whatever it is, for more than 15 minutes. That's a long time. You can distance yourself, right? There are ways to mitigate that, right? That's just part of what our new reality is. That's how the world is living right now. So I don't think it puts anyone else more at jeopardy than they were. I don't believe that. We have substitutes that are assigned primarily to specific buildings. When there are large numbers, we also get other people in, but that is not the case. That's not what the science tells us. And we're going by what the Department of Health tells us.
Is it safe to say, though, that the stable pods, which were talked about so much over the summer, are not happening anymore, at least when it comes to the staff? They're not able to just stay with one group of students because of they're covering for the 27 teachers that, and moving around.
Remember, Steph, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that mitigation is, you can have a stable pod, you have masks on, you have different layers, right? So you can have less, more, whatever the case may be, but you have to have some of those mitigations in place. Doesn't mean you have to have all of them, right? The more you have, the better it is, but that doesn't mean that because you may not have one. But once again, think about this. So you have those 10 kids, because we don't have more than 15 kids in a class right now, right? That's what our average number in most places are. Maybe
in elementary school, since they're not doing AB day, at least in Providence, there's more than 15 kids in a class. But in middle and high school.
Well, sometimes. So we've split up classes. There's smaller classes. It depends. None of the classes are at capacity, right? None of the classes are where they used to be. That much I can tell you. So if I'm the teacher, I walk in, that's that stable pod, they're always together. The only thing that's different is me, right? I'm coming in, I don't have to be within 6 feet of the kids for any given number of minutes. I can walk around, I can do, there's things that you can do. And I think when we met with Dr. Bromwich during the summer, he was very clear on the things that we can do. You know, how we do mask breaks, there's mitigation. There is no one size fits all. And I think that's what we need to really discuss. So the teachers union in Providence brought up the moment that I think it was Cranston that had a school closed because they didn't have enough staff. So they had about 15 teachers quarantined, and the school only has about 30 teachers, right? So it all depends on the size of the school, what's happening. And it's not because they were quarantined because they were at work. There was an event that took place outside of work. So I think that we have to be very careful, and every situation is different. Every case is different. So there's no magic number for how this works.
You mentioned events taking place outside of school. There was this big high school party that kids from 4 different high schools went to that the governor has spoken about at her briefings, led to hundreds of people quarantined. I think at least one of the schools went remote for a little bit. I mean, does that frustrate you when you're trying to keep the schools open, but could super spreader events like that lead to schools or districts going remote if they continue to happen?
Well, I think that there will be, it depends how many kids are at the party, but but it was very disappointing, very disheartening, and I think extremely irresponsible. I'm a parent of 2 kids. It's not just your kids. You are endangering the lives of so many different people. That's not okay. It is really not okay. As a parent, as an educator, as a citizen of Rhode Island, that's not okay. I have a big problem with that. Will it impact? It can. It all depends. We had to quarantine an entire soccer team. It's just not okay. This is not about us personally. And we know that schools haven't been the super spreaders because there are all these mitigation in place, right? So we have to be very conscious and aware of the things that we're doing outside of school, because that's where we're seeing these things happen.
There is a lot of talk about schools not being super spreaders. There have, of course, been hundreds of cases in the schools, but not necessarily a widespread outbreak. But you're not testing everyone. You're not doing surveillance testing. You're testing folks who have symptoms or they're a close contact. Has there been talk about doing surveillance testing like the colleges have done or like nursing homes have done? Since there's a lot of students and teachers and staff going into these school buildings every day, could there be surveillance testing done to get a clearer picture of the prevalence of the virus in schools?
We're talking about different ways and what second semester will look like and the things that we can put in place with the Department of Health. So we are thinking about what that can look like. The challenge is that we're one of the states that has done the most testing, right? And it's a big job. It's a huge job, and we want to be able to do it well. But we're looking at all those things. So we are looking at changing some of the procedures as we move on, because even though schools are not the super spreaders, we live within Rhode Island, right? So we have to also stay very vigilant about what's happening throughout the state so that we can shift. I've been saying from the very beginning that this is all going to be about flexibility, right? We're going to have to shift depending on what we see, what happens. And it is going to be a case by case, district by district, county by county decision.
It's been 1 year since you took control of the Providence Public Schools. How much do you think you've been able to improve that school system, and what's next in the turnaround?
So it has been a year now in November. It's very exciting, but right smack in the middle of that year, we got a pandemic, right? That was like the gift that keeps giving, right? But what's exciting is that we have put things in place. Even through a pandemic, we've been able to move certain things. And I'll tell you, we've bought a curriculum. We never had, the money to do that. We reallocated funds, spent $4 million on a curriculum, and then we asked them to create it digitally for us as well, because we needed it during COVID. Professional development, if you recall, we only had 1. We started the school year with 5 up front. and then they're more scheduled throughout the school year. So that has been drastically different. The quality of the things that are happening. But this has been a system that has been broken for a very long time. So we're putting in the foundation right now. But there are things that we are very proud of, the way that the district office has been restructured to get more support directly into the schools. The Office of Parent Engagement, totally different in terms of functioning. So there's a lot of change that's taken place that's laying the foundation. Let's be real about where we are. But we've really looked at the budget in a very different way. So when I first came here, I kept hearing from parents, 2.5 miles, it's too far for our kids to walk. And apparently this had been a problem for many, many, many years. We changed that. It's only 1 mile right now. And that costs us money, but we decided that that was important. So we reallocated funds, worked with RIPTA, and made sure that it's 1 mile right now. That's a big deal. This is something that the district has been trying to do for years. So there are some substantial changes that we're really proud of. And we'll be able to share that. We have a report coming out.
The voters in Providence and in multiple communities approved referendums on Tuesday for school infrastructure. You don't get to decide what the other communities do with their money, but in Providence, what will that money be spent on?
Well, new schools, new buildings, right? Like I think for a long time, we've been doing a patch-up job. And now during the pandemic, it has become very, very clear that we do need to invest in our buildings. I mean, if ever a time there has been, it is now. So we're not going to spend 6 years to fix a roof. We have swing space for the very first time that we never had in Providence. So what that means for the average viewer is that we'll have a space that we can temporarily relocate kids so that we can actually work during the school day to get the work done in the building instead of working after school or just during the vacations. So it expedites the process. And we're looking forward to modernizing what the school buildings look like in Providence.
What is the plan for the winter when it comes to school buildings? Right now, there's been open windows. Some schools have been able to go outside for lunch if they have the outdoor space. That's not going to be possible when it's so cold. How are you going to keep the schools safe in the winter?
So we have purchased HEPA filters for every single classroom in the state of Rhode Island. So we will be closing the windows and putting in HEPA filters in the classrooms.
How many is that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we've got
6,100. Yeah, 6,100.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, and so every classroom in Rhode Island will have an air purifier with a HEPA filter that's helping the airflow turnover this winter.
Yep.
Got it. And my final question for you is, listen, we are in the middle of a presidential election that has lasted 4 days now. The president last night, to be frank, made claims about our free and fair elections that were not true. Would you consider mandatory civics classes for students in Rhode Island?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to. I think the big question is, how is this election so close, regardless of what party or whatever? But clearly, we have not done a great job of really working on civics, what that looks like, what our civic responsibilities are. So I think it's really important. It's really important for this nation as we move forward, right? I think we're in a place where we never thought we'd be. So it's more important than ever that we do mandate a class like that. And that is on the agenda. That's something that we are going to do.
Does that require an act of the General Assembly? Do you know? Not to put you on the spot.
I don't think so.
Interesting.
I don't think so.
Okay, but it's on your list of priorities.
It is. It has been, and more so now.
Got it.
Yeah.
Commissioner Infante-Green, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate the time.
Hi, Steph.